Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it, considering it's 9 a.m. after data night out. Honestly, I was expecting like 10 people and that we would kind of just sit in a circle and talk about Tableau. So I'm really happy that there's more of you here. And hopefully this session makes it worth getting out of bed and coming and learning a bit more about Tableau. So today we're going to be talking all about tips and tricks of the user interface in Tableau Desktop. My name is Rafi Zelikowski, and I work with our product consulting team based in London, England. And hopefully, what I hope that you get out of today are tips that will help you have your analysis go much more smoothly and much more quickly. So this might look really intimidating right now, but this is basically a list of everything we're going to cover in the next 40 minutes. And the session is recorded, so don't worry too much about taking notes. Just kind of sit back and relax. And I promise you it won't look as intimidating or scary by the end. So it actually may surprise some of you that despite my super posh British accent, I'm actually originally from California, from Los Angeles. And there's a lot that I miss about living in California. One of them definitely being the weather. I don't know if any of you have heard, but London does not have the greatest weather. It basically rains all the time. Like even when it's sunny in the morning, it rains by the end of the day. Another thing I miss, obviously, is my friends and family. So I'm the youngest of 3 girls, and my mom wanted boys, so that explains my name, if any of you are wondering. My other sister's name is Daniel. It's not a joke. And being the youngest is sometimes challenging. Everyone says that we're like the spoiled ones in the family, that we get whatever we want. But I'm sure some of you can sympathize that that's not always the case. So this is me and my family. They're usually either arguing over me or sitting on me, which is the case in the second photo. So when my family asks if I'm going to visit them after Las Vegas, I do, of course, say yes, but I kind of have an ulterior motive because besides missing my family, my friends, and the weather, what I really miss about living in California is access to good tacos. In London, there's just no good tacos. They don't understand. There's no spice except curry, and that really doesn't work with tacos. So I'm really excited to go back to LA after being here at conference, mostly to have tacos. And of course, and to see my family, of course. And of course, working for a data-driven company, I wanted to figure out what was the best way for me to actually get to LA after Las Vegas. Unless anyone can loan me a hot air balloon or a spaceship, I wanted to actually get some real data and figure out what was the best way to get to LA. So hopefully by the end of this session, I'll be able to answer that question, and you'll be able to analyze your own data and get insight from your data more quickly as well. All right, let's get started. So the first thing I wanted to do is connect to some data from Google Maps that just has the different methods that you can take to get from Las Vegas to Los Angeles. And if any of you have connected to data before, which hopefully at this point you have, you'll recognize this window, right? So in Tableau, we allow you to connect to different flat files or to data that exists on one of many servers. But already in the data connection experience, we can start to save time. So if I know, oops, go back. If I know I already want to connect to a flat file or, for example, to a Tableau data extract, I can just go to where that file is located, pick it up, and drag it into Tableau. And then Tableau will automatically connect to that data. Similarly, if I am knowing that I just want to connect quickly to a table of data, this isn't like a database that's going to be updating all the time, I just want to get some quick insight, I can go to any table of data, in this case I have it in Excel, select that data, use Control-C to copy it, and then back in Tableau, if I hit Control-V, Tableau creates a temporary connection to that data. So I now can go back into the data pane and work with this data just like if I went through the manual connection experience. Again, this is really useful for when you just want to get quick insight from your data. Okay, so this is a really simple table, right? It has the different methods. It has my path, so from Las Vegas to LAX, and then it has maximum time and minimum time. Now I want to work with my data a little bit so that I can actually save time once I started to analyze it. So I already know I just want to see one column for my time. I don't want to have to compare maximum and minimum. So with Tableau, what I can do is go ahead and control and select my maximum time and my minimum time, and tell Tableau I just want to pivot this data, so that now I have one column that's my time in minutes. Right now I'm looking at a table layout or preview of my data. Let's say I had a data set that had many, many columns to it. If I want to be able to see a whole list of my columns and work with my data that way, I could just flip the view so that I'm looking only at my field names. And I can even sort those, right? So again, this is only 4 columns, not really necessary. But if I wanted to, I could then choose to sort this A to Z, or A to Z, as I've now learned to say, or back in the data source order. All right, going back, I might want to do just a few more things to my data. So for example, if I wanted to be able to split up my path so that I have an origin city and a destination city, without having to write any calculations, I can just tell Tableau I want to split this column so that I have all possible columns with that separator, and now I have my origin and my destination, and I can always go ahead and hide that original column. Finally, I can see that some of my time in minutes are quite large numbers. So I may want to already decide that I want to see this time in hours instead of minutes. So I can go ahead and tell Tableau that I want to create a calculation. And I'll just call this my time in hours. And I can just say time in minutes divided by 60. And there we go. So now I'm ready to figure out what the best method should be. So I'll go into my first worksheet. Sorry? That's fine. Paying close attention up in front, I like it. All right, so if you've analyzed data before in Tableau, if you're just getting started, you've probably seen Show Me. And Show Me is a great way to start building visualizations quickly in Tableau. So how it works is I can just go ahead and select my time in hours, and I can use my Control key to also select my method. Now Tableau will highlight the visualizations I can make, and it will also put a little orange square around what it considers visual best practice. Okay, so now I can see my bars by the time in hours. And I can use my toolbar up here to make this a bit easier to see. So I can sort this in ascending order, and I can even add in labels as well. So already something looks a bit wrong to me. We went on many torturous road trips when I was young between LA and Las Vegas. I always had to sit in the middle seat. So I know that it never took 8.5 hours, even though it felt like it. And that's because I pivoted my data. So I need to change my time in hours from the default that Tableau assigns, which is sum, to an average. So I'll go ahead and just change this now to average, and 4.25 hours looks a bit more correct. So now I can start to make a decision. I have walking, which takes 97 hours. I don't think that's really an option through the desert. Cycling takes 27 hours. Again, unless that's some sort of like charity fundraiser, I don't think I should do that. Transit, 6 hours. Did anyone else know there was transit between Las Vegas and LA? People are nodding. Okay, maybe it's an LA thing that I just don't think there's public transit anywhere. Driving, 4.5 hours, we already know that. And flying, 1 hour and 8 minutes. So I think clearly flying is the winner here, even though the road trip can sometimes be fun. So now that I know which method I want to take, I have a lot more questions, right? I want to know, okay, which airline should I take? Which time of day should I fly? And then which airport should I fly into? Because LA has a lot of different airports. So to do and answer these questions, I need to connect to some more data. And in this case, my data exists in an Amazon Redshift database. So if I go back and edit my data source. Let me make sure I have my password. All right, we've already seen a lot of ways that the data pane can already help you save time with your analysis, but there's one more thing that I think is really important, and that's if you have a question that you can answer without actually having to build any visualizations. So this data set is already filtered to flights from Las Vegas. What if I just wanted to know what's the farthest place that I could fly to? What's going to take me the longest? I don't actually need to build a visualization to answer that question. I have a column called airtime, and I can just tell Tableau to sort that column directly from the data pane. And now if I sorted it highest to lowest value, I can see that Honolulu would take the longest from Las Vegas in terms of domestic flights. Also a good option. Although I've never been there, so I don't know how good the tacos are. So I'm still going to go to LA. Okay. In the first exercise, we used Show Me to build our visualization. But for the rest of the session, I want to show you how you can build everything manually. Because actually, when you start to understand how to build things in Tableau, you can often do them faster than you can in Show Me. Because Show Me makes a lot of guesses about what you want to see. And you sometimes spend extra time customizing what Show Me builds, when if you just built from scratch, you could actually do your analysis a bit more quickly. So don't be scared of building things manually. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to know was which airline I should fly. And I have a field in my data called carrier. So to use this in my visualization, I can either drag it anywhere in the field or on our marks card, or I can drag it onto rows or columns. So I'll drag it onto rows, and now I have a list of my airlines. In my measures, we just saw that I had a field called airtime, so I wanted to know which airline would get me there the quickest, right? And again, in our first visualization, Tableau defaulted my measure to a sum. And in this case, I already know that I want an average. So to save myself some time, I can right-click with my mouse as I drag in airtime, and Tableau will prompt me for which aggregation I want to use. This might seem like I'm getting really trivial with how much time I'm saving because it's only 2 clicks. But every time you drag something into the view in Tableau, it's sending a query back to your database. So potentially, you could be saving a lot more time if you're reducing the number of queries that you're sending to your database. All right, so again, I can now sort this by my least amount of airtime. And this time I'm going to do this from my axis. So I'll just click this twice. And I can see that American Eagle has the shortest flight times from Las Vegas. But we've all probably flown before, and we know that the suggested airtime is not always what actually happens because we often have delays. So I have another field called arrival delay that I want to bring in. Again, I'm going to right-click and drag this and put it next to airtime as an average. Okay, so we can see that most of the airlines actually do have an average arrival delay. Aloha Air Cargo is often early, but it doesn't probably fly to LA, so I'm going to exclude that from my data with just one click. And now what I really want to see is kind of my total of these two figures, right? I don't just want to have to scan with my eyes and compare the two values. I want just one value for my average delay and average airtime. I could go back to my data source and write a calculation, or even write a calculated field manually in my data pane here. But if I'm in the flow of analysis, I don't necessarily want to leave that to write a calculation. So instead, I want to stay in the flow. And to do that, I can write a temporary calculation directly on my columns shelf. So just by double-clicking on my column shelf here, I can now either start typing, or I could just drag in my pills. So drag in my average airtime and add in my average arrival delay and hit enter. And now I have an entirely new field that's adding up those two values. So I can go ahead and use my control key to multi-select my airtime and my arrival delay and drag it off the canvas. Sort this again, and now I have my total kind of estimated flight time. Okay, so I've created this temporary calculation, but what if I want to reuse it somewhere else in the view? Let's say I wanted to add labels to these bars, and I don't want to have to rewrite the calculation. So anytime you want to reuse a field, you can either drag it again from your measures, or if you have it already in the view somewhere, you can hold down your control key and create a copy of that pill. So if I didn't hold down my control key and I drag this over to label, it's going to take it off of columns. If I go back and hold down my control key as I drag it and drop it onto label, then it makes a copy. So now I have that same calculation written on my labels and as the length of my bars. Again, if I wanted to save this calculation and reuse it later, I can perform the same action, drag it over to my measures, and save it as my total estimated flight time. Okay, the next thing I might want to see is not just how long the flights are for a given airline, but also the number of flights that they have. So I want to make sure I'm taking a popular airline. So I'll go ahead and drag my flights onto color here. And I can see that Southwest Airlines actually has many more flights from Las Vegas than the other carriers. And this is kind of skewing how my bars look or how the color looks. And it's making it a bit harder to make decisions. So I want to go ahead and edit the colors in this visualization. I'll use orange-blue diverging. And then in the advanced section here, I have the option to choose my start and end point for the range and also the center. So the center is really what's being skewed by the very high value of Southwest Airlines. I might want to change this to, let's say, 10,000 or 20,000. And if you're lazy like me or you don't remember how many zeros should be in 1,000, you can cheat a little bit and just put a K. And then if I go ahead and hit apply, Tableau will convert that K to 1,000. So that's anywhere that you're inputting a number as a value. All right, so if I hit OK, this makes this a little bit easier to see. I can still see that Southwest has by far the highest number of flights, but I can now have a bit more depth of information around other airlines like US Airways or United. Now, my view is currently sorted by my estimated flight time, but what if I wanted to sort this by the airlines that have the highest number of flights? So I could go into carrier here and go into sort and do this manually, right? So I could say that I want to sort my carriers by my total number of flights. Or what I could do is just click on the number of flights pill, and you can see it goes a little bit of a darker shade of green. And if I click on that and then click my sort, then I can now sort my bar chart by the number of flights. Again, I can click back on total estimated flight time and sort that again. I can do this like all day. It's super fun for me. Yeah, you can tell we're nerds at Tableau. Similarly, you may have seen next to the sort bars that you can do something called swap rows and columns. So that just changes what you have on rows and columns, so you can change the direction of your visualization. But sometimes instead of just swapping rows and columns, you may want to actually change the values that you have on your marks card with what you have on either columns or rows. So let's say I wanted to actually have the length of my bars be the number of flights and the color be the total estimated flight time. The fastest way to do that in Tableau is to go to your analysis menu. And second up from the bottom is called cycle fields. For the first 2 years I worked here, I never knew that existed. If I go ahead and hit cycle fields, it swaps those measures. So again, the use case for this is not too strong, right? It would take me like 5 seconds to go ahead and switch those. But let's say you're building something like a bullet chart and you use show me and Tableau puts the wrong measure as your reference line. So you can use cycle fields to change that really quickly. Okay, so now I know a bit about which carrier, which airline I should take. But as I said, LA has a few different airports, so I want to figure out which one's the best one to go to. And in my data set, I already have airport codes for my destination airports, and Tableau will pick up that airport code and automatically recognize it as a geographic location. So you can see it has a little globe icon next to it. The fastest way to create a map, if you have one of those globe icons, is just to drag the field right into the middle of your view. And now Tableau will put that airport code onto detail, and it will bring in a generated longitude and latitude automatically. So now I can see all the airports that I can fly to from Las Vegas domestically. I might just also put this on label so we can see. And I might add in my total estimated flight time and my number of flights again. So some of my favorite features around mapping allow you to kind of explore your map and explore your data with layers that don't necessarily exist in your data set. So I don't have anywhere in my data set US states or postcodes, for example. But I can still search and zoom in on my map using those values. So with my search bar at the top right, I could just say, well, I want to see everywhere we fly to in California. And then Tableau will automatically zoom into California. I could even go down to Los Angeles, and we see it's a beautiful metropolis full of parks and green areas. And I could even zoom down to the postcode level, like I said before. So if anyone wants to know where my mom lives, it's right here. It's a really nice area, and she's very hospitable, so you're welcome to come visit. Just don't tell her that I prefer tacos to family dinners. So I wanted to know which airport I should fly to, and obviously that should be the one that's the closest to where I live in LA, right? And there's a few tools I can use to do this in Tableau. So if I want to zoom out from the current location I'm in, I can just use the scroll bar on my mouse to zoom out a bit, and I can see that I have Burbank Airport that's nearby, and I have LAX. If I want to pan my view, I can hold my Shift key and my cursor changes into the ability to pan rather than to select. And then I can see I also have LAX and Long Beach. But of course I want kind of a data-driven decision, not just visually what I see is closest. So also what I can do with a map is choose the ability to select points based on a radius, right? So if I change my tool here to radial selection, I can kind of hover my mouse over where my mom lives. And as I drag out, I can see that Burbank is about 7 miles away, LAX 11, Long Beach 20, 23, 24, that's getting a little far. And anything outside of that's probably not okay. So again, I didn't have to write any calculations for distances. I didn't have distances in my data set. Tableau is able to calculate that for me. Okay, so now I have these 3 data points, and I want to be able to maybe analyze them later with the different visualizations. So I'm going to go ahead and create a set of these 3 airports, and I'll just call these closest to mom's house. All right, the last thing I wanted to know is when should I fly? So in my data set, I have a flight date, and I have those measures that I've already been looking at. So let's look at our total estimated flight time. And similar to when you right-click and drag a measure and you can decide the aggregation, you can do the same thing with dimensions, and that's really useful when you're working with dates. So if I right-click and drag my flight date out onto columns, then Tableau's asking me at what level I want to see my date. Do I want to see it at year, month, or do I want to see it, for example, on a continuous axis? So I'll go ahead and choose continuous. And now we can see all of our recorded flights from Las Vegas over time. And similarly to the map, I think it's really interesting when you're able to interact with your data without necessarily filtering it. Because kind of how we like to work in Tableau is letting what you see in your visualization drive your insights, right? Not just having to predetermine what you think might be insightful or interesting in your data. So there's a few different ways you can do this with non-map views as well. And one of my favorites is being able to shift or stretch out your axis. So in this case, when I have a lot of points really close together, it's hard to get an insight. What I can do is hold down my Control key and then click my right and left arrows. And this changes the size of my axis, right? So I can now actually stretch out my axis and then scroll along to see if there's any patterns in my data. Similarly, just bring this back. If I want to focus on a particular area, again, without having to filter it, if I hold Control and Shift at the same time, my cursor turns into a little magnifying glass. And what I can do is select some data points, and Tableau will automatically zoom in the axis to that point. All right, so looking at this data, I can see that it looks pretty erratic, but that's probably because we have more of a weekday pattern rather than looking at all of our flights over time. So I'm going to change my flight date to be weekdays instead of a continuous axis, and maybe just change this to bars. So now I want to be able to compare my number of flights with the estimated flight time. And if you've already created a dual axis in Tableau, you probably know that one way you can do it is to bring in a secondary measure and then go to the drop-down menu of that measure and select dual axis. But of course, we have a faster way to do this. So if I bring out my flights, and I already know I want a dual axis, I can just drag that measure to the opposite side of my canvas. And you'll see it kind of has like a shadow green bar. That's me telling Tableau I want to create a new axis from this measure. So as soon as I drop that, I now have two axes with those two different measures. And I have two different marks cards. So I can change my second marks card, for example, to a line. And I'll just make that a bit darker so it's easier for you guys to see. Okay. If I wanted to switch the order of which marks are in front and which ones are behind, all I have to do is switch around the measures on my rows. So you can see now my number of flights has gone behind my flight time, so on and so forth. Now, sometimes you may be working with analysis that someone else has sent you. So if I went and hid this header, does anyone know how I could tell that this was a dual axis view? Any guesses? Yes. Yes, awesome. So if you noticed, when you create a dual axis, Tableau straightens the edges on the two pills next to each other. So that's your visual indicator that you're working with a dual axis view. 10 points. Okay. So this is helpful, but again, we wanted to just know this information for the 3 different airports that I might be able to fly to. So this is when I can use that set that I had. So now I don't have to go in and manually check those 3 airports or remember what they are. I can just take that set that I already created, drop it onto filters, and now my view is already filtered to those 3 closest airports. So it tells me that Saturday would probably be the best time to fly, but it also has the least amount of flights. All right, and I don't think Tableau is going to pay for my hotel till Saturday, unfortunately. So let's look at all of our airports and be able to compare them. I'm going to bring in, again, my airport code, and I'll just place it on color. So now I can see that my bars are being split up by my different airports. Burbank is blue, LAX is orange, Long Beach is red, I guess? Yeah, red. If I wanted to switch the sort order of these bars, I could actually do this straight from my color legend. So I could just drag Burbank down to the bottom of my color legend, and it will move to the bottom of my chart. Again, these are just easy ways to be able to change your analysis without having to go and do anything manually. All right. Right now I can see that, actually I might switch these back over. Yeah, right now I can see that I have orange signifying both my number of flights and my estimated flight time. But I might want to be able to differentiate the color of my measures with also the color of my different airports. So I could bring measure names back into my view and drop it on color, but that just replaces what I already had on color, which was my different airports. I want both of them to be able to be distinguished. So instead what I'm going to do is bring measure names first just onto detail in my marks card. And then on the left-hand side, I have the ability to select color. And this time, if I select it, Tableau will add this as a secondary color rather than replace what I originally had on color. So now I have dark blue to signify LAX flights and light blue to signify flight time for LAX. So I can start to add some richness to my analysis by knowing that I have one color to identify an airport and then shades of that color to distinguish between the two different measures. If I wanted to, I could also switch the order of these. So if I just switch the order on the marks card, it will do the same thing, but it will first do the shades by the measure, the colors by the measure, and then the shades by the airport. Okay, so I've answered a bunch of questions, but they haven't really given me any answer as to where should I actually fly to, which airline, all of that information. So I'm going to bring these all together in a dashboard. I'll go ahead and name this dashboard How to Get Tacos Quickly. And bring in my airline bar chart, my map of where to fly, and my timeline of where to fly to. Okay, so whenever I make a dashboard, let's add the title, I like to have it have a little bit of a look and feel to it with regards to a theme. Obviously, the theme with this one is tacos. So I'm going to bring in an image of my tacos. Obviously, when you go home and make dashboards, well, you can make them about food if you want, but you might use, in this case, your company's logo or your organization's image instead. So the bottom left here, I have a bunch of different dashboard objects, and one of them is an image. And if you don't necessarily know where you want this to go, but you want it somewhere in your view to kind of guide how you format your dashboard, you can just bring it in as a floating object first. So if I hold my Shift key, as I drag out this image object, it becomes floating, and then I can drop it anywhere on the dashboard. So I'll just drop it somewhere here. That's from a different session, so I'll go ahead and pick my tacos. Beautiful. So go ahead and center that image, and now I can format my dashboard a bit. So let's say I want my different colors to kind of match the look and feel of my image of tacos. I can go into my color legend here and start to adjust the color. So if I pick up this orange color, what I can do is tell Tableau, actually I want to pick a screen color instead, and that just allows me to navigate over to my image and pick, for example, the nice color of the tortilla as one of my colors, and I can add that to a custom color so I can save it and use it later. And then maybe for the other end of the spectrum, the green of the avocado. Okay. I could do that with the rest of the visualizations as well. Similarly, if your organization already has custom color palettes that you use, you can save these and reuse them in all of your different workbooks in Tableau. So I already have a custom color palette that's called Tacos and has the colors that go with my image. And I can just tell Tableau to assign this palette to my timeline and bar chart. And then it already looks customized. Okay, so this is almost done. One more thing I might want to do is get rid of some of these different legends and filters that I might not necessarily need in my final dashboard. What you could do is go ahead and remove each of these one by one, but all of your legends and filters, when they're brought in automatically in Tableau, are brought into what we call a layout container. And a layout container is one of these objects in the bottom left that say horizontal or vertical. You can use them to organize your sheets, but if you already have one on the dashboard and you want to be able to select it, the fastest way to do this is just to double-click on any of these gray bars of your dashboard objects, and that will select the layout container if any objects exist in one. So now I can go ahead and actually remove all these items at once. So I still want to be able to answer my question, and to do that I want to make my dashboard interactive. So on each of my sheets, I can say that I want to use these worksheets as filters. So I'll say I want to use my map as a filter and my bar chart as a filter. And now I can say, well, if I want to take Southwest Airlines because it probably has the most options, I can click on Southwest Airlines, and then I can see that I can only fly to LAX and to Burbank, and then which time of day is better. Similarly, if I know I want to fly to Burbank, I can deselect that, select Burbank, see which airlines are possible, and then see the time of day. So this only has 2 sheets that we have actions on, but if you have a dashboard where you've added a lot of interactivity, and you might get a little bit lost of what you've selected, the easiest way to deselect all of your options or all of your filters is just to hit your escape key. So if I hit escape, it now resets my dashboard to the state it was in before. Cool, so I kind of know when I need to go to LA now, which airport I should go to. But of course, what I need to figure out is where I should eat when I get to LA. So I'm gonna connect to one more data set. And this data set has information on restaurant ratings in LA County. So I'm gonna use kind of all the tricks I've already learned to answer my question really quickly. So we have our score here. I can right click and drag this, bring it in as an average, bring in our grade here on color. So A, B, and C. C is like, don't ever eat there, you'll get sick. A is good. And bring in my activity date. So again, right click and drag that out, pick my years. And now I want to bring in the name of my restaurant. So I can go ahead and bring name on detail. And then Tableau's smart, it's telling me you have almost 40,000 restaurants. Are you sure you want to see them all in your visualization? I obviously don't, so I'm gonna follow what Tableau advises me to do and filter this first. And in this case, I want to add what we call a wildcard filter, which means I just want to have restaurant names that contain taco somewhere in the title. Hit OK, and now I get all the different taco restaurants. I might change this to be, circle, so it's a bit easier to see. And also maybe take out the need to have 0 in my axis, because the lowest score a restaurant can have is 70. So actually, I already know a restaurant that I want to go to. It's the one that I took the picture from. It's my favorite place. I want to make sure it's also safe to eat at. I can go to the name in my visualization and say that I want to have Tableau show a highlighter. And what that allows me to do is look for that restaurant without filtering out the rest of my data. So again, giving me context to compare it to. So I can go ahead and search for that place I already know. And I'm relieved because they have A ratings in all the years that they've been reviewed. But I feel kind of bad. There's one restaurant down here that did have a C grade. And I want to know if they've always had that grade or if they've changed. So instead of having to go back to the highlighter, remember the name, type it in, I can just click on the name of the restaurant in the tooltip, and then Tableau highlights where else that name appears in my visualization. So now I can see that they've done really well, and they've gone from a 70 up to 97. So maybe I'll give somewhere new a chance. They've obviously put some effort in to be a safe place to eat. All right, I've answered all my questions now, but I can't give this dashboard to my family because their feelings will be hurt that I want to eat tacos more than necessarily hang out with them. So I want to make a new dashboard that I can give to my family and tell them when I'm going to come visit. But don't worry, it's not going to take another half hour. I'm going to cheat a little bit. So just like we used control to be able to copy a pill, you can use control to also duplicate a worksheet or a dashboard. So if I hold down my control key and drag the dashboard next to itself, I can make a duplicate copy of that dashboard. And now I'll just name this how to get to family quickly. And a great tip is if you choose a black and white picture, then you don't have to change any of the rest of the formatting because it all goes. So now it's like I made this just for my family, and they'll feel really special. If you want to make the feel of the dashboard even more customized, you can do this with the dashboard formatting menu. So this allows you to save time just by applying different edits all at the same time. So for example, if I wanted to change my title font and my worksheet titles, I can change them all at the same time. So I don't have to go and edit those one by one. Cool, so hopefully this list doesn't look so scary anymore. Nod, yes? Doesn't look scary. It's a whole bunch of things that are listed, but hopefully what you see is that what Tableau tries to do is make things intuitive for you and help you to get answers of your questions more quickly. That's pretty much enough about me and food and my family, too much information. So I would really appreciate if you fill out the survey. Tell me if you want different food options or if you have any places to recommend to eat. And we have some time, so if anyone has questions, I'm here. We have a mic in the middle of the room if I can't hear you. Otherwise, thank you very much. This one? Okay. Yeah, I'll leave this up while we take questions. Yes?
Could you show the pivot again?
The pivot?
Yes.
Sure. So the question is, can I show the pivot again? Very simply, if you go in and connect to your data, well, I'll have to go in and unpivot them first. But you basically just select multiple columns. It can be more than 2 if you have 10 or 12 columns with the same data type. You just multi-select them and then go to the drop-down menu and hit pivot. And there you go.
Survey data is all.
Yeah, survey data. That's a very useful one for survey data. Yes, you first and then you.
You showed earlier that you were using a set as a filter.
Yes.
I think you created the set by using your map there, right?
Yeah.
Can you show where you actually save that as a set?
Yeah, so the question is around sets and how you can create them. So there's a couple different ways. The way I did was like the lazy way, which is just selecting multiple points. So if I went and selected these 2 airports and hover over them, in the tooltip you'll see the option here to create a set. It's right next to the one for creating a group. And then I can create that manually. I can add it to an existing set. Otherwise, the way you would traditionally create a set is by selecting a dimension. So if I went and selected airport code destination, I can say create set. And then I have a few different options. So I can set a condition. I can say make a data-driven choice of what's included in the set or not. So let's say I did have like a distance calculation, then I can say anything that comes into this radius include in the set, and then as the data updates, so will the set. I had one over here.
Yeah, it's also relevant to the map, but very simple. I missed it. Pan, you just held shift.
Sorry?
Pan, you just held shift.
Yeah, so panning, you just hold your shift key and it changes the cursor. And then you can zoom with your mouse scroll bar. Yes?
And this one's real simple. You're zooming in and out.
Oh, yeah.
How do you do that?
The question is how I'm zooming in and out. It's just an application called Zoom It, not Tableau related. Oh, but this is a good one actually. If you're ever demoing calculations, this is Tableau related. If you start writing something, hit your control key and scroll, and it will make the text in the calculation bigger. Not even if you're demoing, if you're just blind like I am. Any other questions? Yes?
I have a dashboard that has, let's say, 4 charts, and it's filtered on one segment, let's say the other side. And I would create another dashboard that's filtered on something different, let's say state. When I copy paste it, both filter, I create duplicated, let's say. The filters are related. When I change one, both are changed. How do you, I don't know.
So the question is, if you have multiple dashboards that have the same filters, when you change one filter, are they going to change? It changes both of them.
How would make it separate?
So to make them separate, I would make a duplicate copy of the field that you have on filter and just use one on each of them. Because if you have a filter that's applying to a specific worksheet, no matter if you have that worksheet on one dashboard or 10 dashboards, the same filter is going to affect it. So the filter is tied to the worksheet, but the same worksheet can be put on multiple dashboards. So I would just duplicate the field. Yes?
Earlier you showed where you had 3 bars and you moved the colors up and down by changing the legend.
Yes.
I've done that with the legend and the colors don't move. Is there a particular, are there underlying things going on as well that would prevent that from happening?
So the question is, when you sort colors in your viz by changing them on the color legend, are there some instances where that won't work? Yes, if you have anything that's not like a discrete dimension on color. So for example, if I just had measure names on my color, I wouldn't be able to sort it. So it's when you have a dimension on color. Sure.
Going back to this dashboard question, is there a quick way to duplicate that filter? Do I have to drag and drop and redo it?
You would basically just, so I would make 2 versions of that carrier field. Yeah, just duplicate the field, and then on one of them, on one sheet, you put one version, on the second sheet, the other version. Sure. Yes?
The escape button to revert back to blank, does that work on filters on the right-hand side as well? Or is that just filter actions and dashboard actions?
That is a good question. I don't know, so let's find out. The question is, when I used escape to clear all the action filters, does that also apply to quick filters? So let's add in carrier here. And let's say I make a few selections. Just filter actions. Good question. Yes? Excellent question. So the question is, what's the difference between a group and a set? A set basically allows you to create like a Boolean function out of a selected set of data. So by selecting those 3 airports, I'm not grouping them into one dimension member that says LAX/Burbank/Long Beach. I'm still keeping them as 3 separate dimension members, but I'm creating them as a subset. So then it allows me to do a bit richer analysis, like I could compare what are the flights for those 3 airports versus the rest of the airports in the list, as opposed to just having them grouped up into one line. And sets are dynamic, and groups aren't. So, anything else? No. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming, especially 9 a.m. after data night out. Go drink some water and enjoy the rest of conference. Thanks very much.